Hello, and welcome back to Knights of the Nerds Table. I'm your host, Dieter, and quick question. How many different times do you think the Marvel marketing department is going to hook us with the debut of the X-Men in MCU?
Everybody knows.
First we had the revelation that Miss Marvel's a mutant. Then we had Namor in Black Panther 2. Then Beast's cameo in the Marvels. Then we had X-Men 97, and now Deadpool and Wolverine. Marvel's probably going to get us with the whole X-Men debut a few more times, but for now, it's July, so it's time for us to talk about the first official X-Men related movie under the MCU. So, subscribe, and let's talk about what we can expect from Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine will make its big screen debut on July 26th of 2024, and will feature the returns of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, reprising their respective eponymous roles from Fox's X-Men franchise. Best we can piece together from the trailers, a retired Deadpool will be ripped out of his quote-unquote peaceful life by the TVA that was last seen in seasons 1 and 2 of Loki, in order to neutralize a threat to the multiverse, which I personally assume is going to be Cassandra Nova, played by Emma Corrin. Along for the ride will be an alternate universe Wolverine who is running from a series of tragedies and failures in his past. And, that's that. The plot is pretty simple once you take the multiverse out of it.
I don't think you're supposed to say that.
The really interesting stuff about this movie comes down to how it's executed. Deadpool and Wolverine has the unenviable task of having to be all things to all people. It is the first MCU X-Men film, while simultaneously being a coda for Fox's X-Men franchise. It's the only MCU film this year, so it has to simultaneously satisfy fans while rehabilitating Marvel's supposedly waning reputation amongst lapsed fans and casual moviegoers. That is a lot to ask for any movie, and I really don't know if this one can pull it off.
Oh my God.
But I think that even a failed attempt is going to be something special regardless. So let's take a little closer look at the elements at play. I mentioned at the top of the video that this is the MCU's 5th debut of mutants. And that's mostly me being facetious, but really, if you think about it, this isn't the first MCU X-Men film. It is a movie featuring a character from Fox's X-Men franchise in the MCU, and it will only feature a few scenes on the core MCU universe. Best we can tell, our first MCU X-Men movie proper won't take place until after Secret Wars in 2027. So right off the bat, I think we need to take the whole first X-Men movie pressure off of this movie, and just focus on it as a part of the MCU, and a sequel to Deadpool, and the end of Fox's X-Men. Isn't that enough? So, let's talk about how this movie fits into the larger multiverse saga. We know that this movie heavily involves the Time Variance Authority, or TVA, which has been built up over the course of the 2 seasons of Loki, and it has close ties to this saga's big bad, Kang. Actually, is he the big bad anymore? That's probably worth a separate video. The point is, the TVA polices the multiverse and is integral to the underpinnings of this saga's plot. In my opinion, bringing them into the Deadpool movie is really clever. So far, they've only been in Loki, which is locked behind the Disney Plus paywall. A casual viewer may not have seen it. If they're going to be as important to the saga as they seem to be, hooking them into the plot of Deadpool, which is one of the biggest names in Marvel at the moment, is probably a really good way to get the casual viewer familiar with them before Secret Wars.
Marvel Jesus.
Beyond that, do I think that Deadpool is going to play a major role in future MCU movies like Avengers? My hot take is that if the producers are smart, no. The folks over at Firaxis Games, the company behind the excellent game Marvel's Midnight Suns, pointed out that the reason that they didn't have Deadpool as a character in the main story was because that Deadpool has a bad habit of usurping any narrative that he's in. Having him be a major player in the overarching MCU is probably not in anybody's best interest, particularly if Marvel is trying to build up new characters and new stars. Next, we have to look at this movie from the perspective of it being the third movie in its own standalone series. And to be honest, I've got high hopes for this. It's easy to forget that Deadpool and Deadpool 2, despite, everything about Deadpool, had very strong emotional cores supporting them. The first Deadpool was, as Wade himself points out in the movie, a romantic comedy at its core. And the second one was a surprisingly touching story about breaking cycles of generational trauma through, in part, vehicular manslaughter and anal electrocution. So wholesome. The only way that this movie fails, in my mind, is if it forgets about this aspect of the prior Deadpool films. Unfortunately, I don't think it has. The scenes that have been released by Marvel have shown some fairly earnest character work on the part of Ryan Reynolds, including a scene where he explains to Wolverine just how much of a hero Logan actually is. And then, of course, there's the trailer that was released this morning at time of writing, which features Logan having a heartfelt conversation with a returning character from his most recent movie. And speaking of returning characters, let's talk about the Fox of it all. Because this movie has gone deep to bring back a ton of cameos from Fox's X-Men universe. At the time of writing, we have seen some truly deep cuts, including Tyler Maine's Sabretooth, Aaron Stanford's Pyro, Kelly Hu's Lady Deathstrike, Jason Fleming's Azazel, and what looked to me like Ray Park's Toad. It's also been revealed in the final trailer that Daphne Keane will be reprising her role as X-23 from Logan. There have even been reports that Jennifer Gardner will be reprising her role as Elektra, so we are really hitting the B-sides with this film. And look, I get that a cynical viewer has become jaded by all these cameos. After all, pointing at something and saying, "Ooh, look at this thing you recognize," isn't a replacement for good filmmaking or good storytelling. But here's the thing. For this movie, I kind of don't care. I know I should, but I just love the X-Men so much. I always have. I have every single Fox X-Men movie on Blu-ray, and I only have 2 MCU movies on Blu-ray. I even have The Gifted on DVD. Do you remember that show? Because I do. For better or worse, Fox's X-Men franchise was always the little engine that could. Was it as successful as the MCU or the DCEU? No, but those franchises perfected things that X-Men tried first. It might be hard to remember, but the impact that this franchise had on superhero cinema cannot be understated. The first X-Men solidified making realistic comic book films a bankable option. X-Men First Class did superhero period pieces both before and, in my opinion, better than Captain America and Captain Marvel. Admittedly, First Class only beat Captain America by 1 month, but it still counts. And of course, 5 years before the multiverse saga had even begun, X-Men Days of Future Past introduced us to alternate timelines and time travel in superhero cinema. Was every effort perfect? God, no. X-Men Origins Wolverine is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but I love every single one of these films, and if they want to throw the cinematic equivalent of a parade to honor the universe that I have been watching and loving since 2000, I welcome that, and I will be seated. So thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you think about Deadpool and Wolverine in the comments, and we'll see you next time for more conversations around the Nerds Table.